everyone, this is the Movieman coming to you with yet another added theater reaction / review. This time for Gladiator II, directed by Ridley Scott and starring Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal, and many, many more. I'll be very honest and say, although I do need to do a rewatch, and I purposely didn't do one before I saw this particular film, the original Gladiator was not something I was huge into. I think I recognize that it's a quality film, but I just don't know if it clicked with me. And it may have more to do with my age than anything, but I would have to rewatch and see. And of course, seeing this film made me want to go and revisit it just to see like how different, you know, the storytelling is, the filmmaking. Obviously there are going to be changes. It's been 24 years, so just short of a quarter of a decade. So there's a lot, I'm sure, that is distinctively different and stands out as far as the way this film was made in comparison to the last one. But to start off, Ridley Scott, although I know, as with many a prolific director, maybe some of his latest efforts haven't quite hit the same mark, although I have to say I really did love The Last Duel, and I wasn't really sure what to expect from that one. That was one that I thought was really solid. And then I just think it kind of depends on what you get. You know, I really enjoyed The Last Duel, and then House of Gucci I thought, you know, not quite there, but I still think he's a director that I really appreciate. And he hasn't really lost his touch from what I could see watching this film. I think the production value, the cinematography, all the things you would expect works here. And I think what was so impressive was just the Colosseum itself. This was filmed in Malta and Morocco, and so already having that as a backdrop for this was interesting. But then the actual Colosseum itself and just that as a setting and how brilliantly designed that was, especially when we get water sequence, and just all of that in and of itself was really enjoyable. I also have to say that if Ridley Scott can't really do anything else, he can definitely craft a battle sequence. Although I had my issues with Napoleon as a film, those battle sequences were no joke. Easily the highlight of the film, and given that this is Gladiator, it definitely is a highlight of this film as well. I was here for the violence, for the intensity, for the brutality. If anything, that actually could have been dialed up some more. You know, I'm not quite a gore hound. You see, I haven't gone anywhere near Terrifier or the Terrifier films, but, you know, I can still go a little bit further than this. So I will say I wish there was a little bit more intensity as far as the gore, even though there is a good amount of it. But I wanted more. I'm not going to lie. I will also say that Paul Mescal's performance is really solid, and I think Denzel Washington, I really enjoyed him as well. I'm not gonna lie, that was probably my main draw for seeing this, and he did not disappoint. He really didn't, and I was actually surprised as far as the development of the character and just what part he actually played as far as this film. And you may be able to guess that, you may not be able to guess that from the trailer, but personally, I just enjoyed every moment he was on screen. I already know what the conversation is going to be. I know how I feel about that, and it's not necessarily something that I am the biggest fan of, and I do think that the character deserved more development and explanation as far as understanding his goals, understanding his mindset. I think that was really lacking. I think Denzel, of course, always brings presence, and the costume designers were not playing any jokes with his character and his costume designs. Like, my man was fresh. Roman down to the socks, right? I was about to say Gucci, but I'm like, hey, Roman down to the socks. I mean, he was dressed down in like every scene. So overall, I will say that this was an enjoyable experience for the most part. I do think that at 2 hours and 30 minutes, especially considering this screening started at 7:30, which was news to me because I thought it started at 7. Yeah, those last 30 to 40 minutes, even though it was, you know, arguably one of the more thrilling aspects of the film, I was like yawning. I was like, all right, I'm ready to get home. We got to wrap this up. And so I do think it stretches out the story far more than it needs to. And I wasn't really the biggest fan of that. I also think that some of the acting, even though we have solid actors, really solid ensemble cast, some of the acting and some of the characterization is spotty to me, and I wasn't really sold on some aspects of what they were trying to do within the story. I would also say that although I don't have an issue with Pedro Pascal, and although I think unfortunately he's starting to reach the overexposure part of his career, possibly, just from what I've been seeing, I honestly wasn't buying anything he was selling in this role. I get it. I appreciate it, but it just, every time he was on screen, it felt very forced. It felt very disconnected. It just felt like he was in another film in some way. I wasn't the biggest fan of that, and I think he was honestly miscast, unfortunately. As far as the rest of the supporting cast, everyone's really solid, but I do wonder, when it comes down to it, if this was a film that was 100% necessary, although extremely well made. And I think that this may have some aspects to it that will end up falling into the legacy sequel categorization. There are a couple of films in particular that I felt that this film was modeling itself after, as far as the structure of it and tying into that whole legacy sequel piece, and I was kind of like, And I think from that standpoint, it makes it feel a lot more predictable than it should. I think you'll be able to obviously see certain things coming, and despite the brilliance and the detail and just, I don't know, just the budget and just all of the care and the work that was put into this, although it's very evident, I think it's going to be one of those where, depending on how I feel rewatching the first film, and it's hard to really beat the original, I think this is going to be one where people will either love it or really question its existence, and that is perfectly valid. But for me, this was a really enjoyable experience. Again, stretches itself a little too long. I think there are probably things I'll appreciate more about the first film after rewatching this, and it may just be a story that works together because it is a little bit more of a continuation than I would have thought. Maybe the trailer gives that away. I didn't really see all of the trailer, but yes, it is finding a way to continue the story in a way that was surprising. And I do think that ultimately it is a well-made film, and it was a sequel that didn't necessarily feel superfluous and forced and unnecessary like a few I've been seeing lately. So for that, I will definitely give my kudos to this film, and I'm really excited to see what everyone else thinks, and I might even consider circling around and giving my thoughts on the first film upon rewatch, because it's been a minute. So with that being said, once again, this is the Movieman signing off, and I'll see you at the movies.